Well, hello again, guys, from the streets of Gosforth, where, yes, it's getting colder. The Wet Bandit gloves are out, which feels seasonal, and in my grasp, I've got your questions now. After Eddie Howe's press conference today, the only idea I had in my head for a video was the questions I actually asked of Eddie myself about Sandro Tonali and Bruno Guimaraes. Can they play together? When will they play together? So I put it out there, asked for your questions. 50 of them came in, and 40 of them were about Sandro Tonali and Bruno Guimaraes. So the public gets what the public wants. Let's go. Now, by way of preparation for this, I remember that I've done a few videos on this subject before, and this is a video from over a year ago. This was the title of it. Why Bruno and Tonali is not working. Has Newcastle United's recruitment created a problem? I went back and I watched that video. It was after the defeat down at Brighton early last September. Now, within that, I said that the summer recruitment, with regards to Tonali in particular, hadn't necessarily improved the starting 11, because by that point, I was of the opinion that Bruno and Tonali couldn't play in the same team together. In fact, and I referenced this in the video, I'd flagged that in America before Sandro Tonali had played a competitive game for Newcastle. Now, at the time, a lot of people came back and said I was too negative and I had to give them a chance. They probably had a point in that regard, but certainly when I saw something out there in the States, I was going to commit it to video. I wanted to say what I thought. Here we are now, 15, 16 months on, and we're still having the same discussion. And it certainly seems that Eddie Howe has arrived at the conclusion, based on his team selections, based on his answer to my question today, that Sandro Tonali and Bruno Guimaraes cannot play together. Now, I saw that within 2 or 3 pre-season games before they'd actually gone in to the season proper. Then how it played out at the start of last season, certainly on the evidence of what we saw, and don't forget Sandro Tonali was actually taken out of the team. They can't play together, and the big question is, why can't they play together? And if they can, and they should be able to, how do you then achieve that? So much to go at. Now, Geordie Josh asks, when will Tonali as the 6 and Bruno as the 8 be trialled? I think it's a great question, because I think in part it answers for me what could be the solution going forward. I said so after the Chelsea game in the Cup, when Tonali for the first time was given that responsibility as a 6 in the middle, and I thought he thrived. I thought he was excellent that night, certainly one of his best performances for the club. Now, 3 days later against Arsenal, he came out with the team and he hasn't been back in since. But I saw enough that night to suggest that Sandro Tonali is the 6, would certainly be worth an avenue exploring. Now, if you want to get him and Guimaraes in the team, and so far Eddie Howe hasn't tried this with Tonali in that middle role, it would of course mean Guimaraes going to an 8. Now, when Bruno Guimaraes first arrived at the club, he was excellent in the 8 position. He was up, he was down, he was round, he was into tackles, he was scoring goals, he was creating goals. Remember the diving header against Leicester, still probably one of my greatest NUFC goals, just for the absolute romance and the theatre of it. Those goals down at Norwich when he was bursting into the box. But right now, he doesn't look like sort of player capable of producing that. So to answer Geordie Josh's question, yes, in theory, I think it's worth giving a go, and you would hope that Bruno in the 8 would rediscover some of what he had shown previously. But physically, does he look capable of that? Mentally, actually, does he want to play there? There's clearly a reason that Eddie Howe doesn't want to give that a go. Like I say, for me, a few weeks ago, to get the pair of them in the team, I was saying that should be the solution. Give Tonali that responsibility in the middle and see how he does, because Bruno wasn't actually playing particularly well at the time. Even since then, is Bruno in good form? I flagged this at the start of the season when I said, the question's got to be asked, is it time to take Bruno out of the team? It was a question. I wasn't saying it was definitely, he had to be dropped. I just think it was a subject worth exploring. Now, in the week since then, again, when I put that out there, a lot of people came back and say, you're negative. I'm sick of saying this. I'm not negative. I'm just saying what I see and saying what I think. And then 2 or 3 weeks later, the people who said I was negative, well, they come out to my way of thinking. Does that sound a little bit? Yeah, probably does. But no, I'll leave it in, because it is a little bit of an annoyance, because now a lot of folk are saying, take Bruno out of the team and put Tonali in. But Geordie Josh, and there's so many others, want to find a way to make it work. Now, can it work with Bruno in that 6 and Tonali in the 8? Well, look at the evidence in front of us, guys. It doesn't. And that is why right now Eddie Howe is picking a team, certainly in the last 4 matches, that only has one of Guimaraes or Tonali in from the start. And it was the question I asked of him this morning. I said, yes, they can play together. I should probably rephrase a lot of what I'd said earlier in the video. We're talking about them starting together, not necessarily playing together. I said, yes, they can play together. They've shown in patches, they've linked up well, but can they start games together? That was the question I put to Eddie. He laughed. I think he knows that it is externally a real point of debate, and internally they're discussing this as well. And he gave a really telling, insightful answer that would tell me that right now, on the back of his team selection, that of course is the greatest indicator, but he also believes they can't start games together, and I would be surprised if down at Crystal Palace tomorrow they both were in the starting 11. Now, quickly, little insert here, we expect Bruno Guimaraes to be fit. He came off on Monday night with a glute problem late on. He's trained today. We expect him to be perfectly fine, and I would imagine it'll be Bruno, or one of, certainly not both, it'll be one of them who starts in that middle six role with Willock, who is also fit, and Longstaff either side of him. So in a roundabout way, I'm going to get back to what Eddie Howe said, and like I said, it was telling, and that was because he said, yes, of course they can play together. They're two outstanding players, but it has to be to the benefit of the team. You can put any two players in a team together, of course you can, but it can't be then detrimental to the overall collective. And I think that is what we're seeing with the two of them right now. And Eddie said it's on him to find a way to make that work. Well, right now he hasn't been able to find a way, and I think the only avenue left to explore, which we've already touched on in this video, is Tonali as the 6 and Bruno as the 8, but he doesn't really seem to want to go there. Now, to go back to the questions you guys asked, we've got to look at why it isn't working with the two of them in the starting 11 from the off. And I've used this stat many times, but Sandro Tonali has still only won one Premier League game, and that was his debut against Aston Villa. And when Bruno and Tonali have started together, yes, there was that Aston Villa game. There's only ever been one other occasion, and that was Paris Saint-Germain at home, that Newcastle have won a match. So the numbers are there, the stats are there. For Tonali in particular, it doesn't make good reading that the only Premier League game he's won from the off is his first one 16, 17 months ago. So that would be a concern. I know Eddie and his staff look at these sort of numbers. Conversely, the numbers for Sean Longstaff in terms of when he is in the team are positive. And this was a question from Southern Geordie. Are Bruno and Tonali the new Steven Gerrard and Frank Lampard? Well, certainly in this part of the world, that nature of that debate, that continuing discourse as to how to get them both in the team, well, yeah, I've just been talking about it for the last 10 minutes. So in that respect, they are the new Gerrard and Lampard, but for different reasons. Gerrard and Lampard were incompatible because they both wanted to do the same thing, which was to go forward. It was that presence they needed defensively that became the problem for England with regards to Gerrard and Lampard. I think with Newcastle and Bruno and Tonali, it's almost the opposite. The two of them want to sit in and be the same player. No surprise, Tonali looked far happier with Bruno out of the team when he had that holding role in the middle of the midfield. Bruno has clearly let it be known that is his preferred domain. That is the position, even though when he arrived at Newcastle, he went into the 8, he'd come as a 6 from Lyon. They both want to do the same thing. So unlike Gerrard and Lampard, the effect it has on Newcastle when they're both in the side, I think, is that they're not actually doing enough in the final third of the pitch. Allied to that, I don't think there's enough running power in there. Bruno Guimaraes and his physical issues certainly come back out of shape in the summer. Now he's improved, but I don't think he's ever going to be a player who gets all over the park and provides that real running power on those legs. And even Tonali as well, when he's in the team, I'm not entirely convinced that intensity is there. And when you've got two of your three midfielders in a midfield and in a team whose identity is intensity, and together they're not really providing that at that level, certainly not compared to when you've got Sean Longstaff and Joe Willock in there. Well, that fundamentally is the problem. And you end up with a midfield that on too many occasions is just too easy to play through and play around. And it certainly came to a head down at Chelsea in that game when the midfield three of Joe Linton, Bruno and Sandro Tonali, you looked at that, and I said afterwards, I did the entire video of it, that midfield could not continue. It was time to rip it up and start something new. Eddie was asked lots of questions at the time, and he came out and really vehemently defended the midfield, as he would, as he should. But then again, the biggest indicators of what he's truly thinking is what he does with team selection. That midfield three hasn't played together since. Bruno and Tonali haven't started together since. Joe Linton hasn't started a game in midfield since. So that Chelsea match was the one where everything we'd been saying, everything what had been building to this, over this season, over last season, going back to the start of last year when Tonali came out with the team after that disaster down at Brighton. Well, yeah, the Chelsea game was a time to draw a line under it, and he hasn't been back there. But as Eddie said in answer to my question this morning, it's on him as the manager to find a solution, to find a way to make it work. But right now, I don't think he is going to explore that in terms of putting them both in from the start. Now, Mark Doyle made a good point as well. He said, why on Monday night against West Ham, when Joe Willock went off injured at half-time, why didn't Tonali come on? And why was it Harvey Barnes who came on instead, with Joe Linton going back into midfield? Now, I think Mark makes a good point, because I was surprised at that. And on reflection, and this is with hindsight, now I wouldn't have picked a different starting 11. I think on the back of the victories and the improved performances, to have that midfield three of Longstaff, Bruno and Willock, that was fair. You know, that was the right call. And certainly the first half performance, it was fine, it was okay. It was just let down by an absolutely terrible concession and poor finish. And I don't think managerially Eddie got much wrong in that first half. But looking back now, yeah, I take Mark's point. I think bringing on Sandro Tonali instead of Harvey Barnes, who didn't quite impact as he normally can do, Tonali at half-time and keeping Joe Linton up front, where he's been better recently in one of those wide forward positions, perhaps would have been the better call. But again, doesn't that just talk to the issues and concerns around Bruno and Tonali, that Eddie wasn't prepared to put them both, never mind from the start, he wasn't prepared to put them both on the pitch at the same time from the start of a second half. So yeah, I can see why Tonali and supporters perhaps would be frustrated with that. And certainly then when Tonali came on later in the game, he didn't play well at all. But is that born out of a frustration? And I wouldn't pin too much on him, because by that point the team had become really ragged. But I don't think Eddie was at all happy with the contribution of the substitutions. And he actually made a point afterwards of saying Newcastle got worse when the subs came on. And of course that is talking to the likes of Tonali. So has he got to do more in these cameos? He was certainly good down at Nottingham Forest. I thought he was fantastic when he came on there. Not so much the other night, and I don't think he's necessarily done enough when he started games. So there's some good there, some bad with him, but he's probably never going to get to the levels we hope he can if he isn't given that run in the team. But he's not doing enough to convince Eddie Howe that he's worth a run in the team right now. So in a roundabout way, in terms of looking for answers in this video, we've just come back to a load of new questions. Now, sticking with the same subject, because like I say, the bulk of the questions were on this. And some of the other questions, by the way, guys, I'm really appreciative for them all coming in. I'll keep some of them back for another video over the next couple of weeks as well. But One for Sorrow asks, was Tonali actually bought as Bruno Guimaraes' replacement? I think he might just have been. Now, the Bruno Guimaraes £100 million release clause, which expired at the end of June, which is really telling with regards to PSR, I think that was there to tempt an offer. I know that on the inside there was an acceptance that Bruno might go at the end of last season. Certainly if someone had come in. The release clause was there for a reason, guys. Look at it, you know, it wasn't just put in there as an afterthought. That was really strategic on the part of the player and the club. It was a way of Newcastle protecting themselves against a fee and perhaps tempting someone to come in. Now that didn't happen, and I've always said that I don't think Bruno Guimaraes is a £100 million player. I think he's good. I think he's very good. But the valuation was a little bit too high. And in the end, Newcastle didn't get the money they certainly needed. And I don't think Bruno got the move he perhaps wanted as well. Now listen, Bruno Guimaraes is happy at Newcastle. He's the captain. He's a charismatic, tremendous character. But I do think if Paris Saint-Germain, Manchester City, Real Madrid, Barcelona, whoever it may be, whoever he and the people around him had in their head, if they'd have come in, I think it would have happened. And to that end, knowing a year out that might be the case, yes, the addition of Tonali, I think ultimately he was meant to inherit the role Bruno is currently playing. But they're both still at the club, and it's a problem. Now, Orlando 1900 asks, is Bruno's lack of goals a worry? Well, yes, it is, and by extension, Tonali's lack of goals is a worry as well. He hasn't scored since his debut against Aston Villa. So there again, you've got two midfielders in there who aren't contributing much really by way of assists or by way of goals. So of course, yes, that's a massive concern. Now, when you put Willock and Longstaff in there, it just drags the team further up the field. And listen, West Ham aside, they've looked so much better in those three games when Eddie did pick that midfield three of Willock, Bruno and Longstaff. And I do think that is what he'll go back to tomorrow at Crystal Palace. Finally, guys, away from the subject of Tonali and Guimaraes, Jack Rain asks, can I name 3 possible targets for January? And by extension, North East Steve says, could more EFL players now be targeted given the fees that exist in the Premier League? Well, first of all, to answer Jack, 3 possible targets. I can't really, because everything I'm hearing is that don't expect Newcastle to do much in January. I've said this in previous videos, and the reason I say that is, and I know a lot of you guys say, well, there was the £70 million to spend there on Mark Gay in the summer. Why aren't they going into January with that? Well, even if they bought Gay, I'm repeating myself, I know, but even if they spent £50-60 million on Gay, it would have meant they would have to sell now to satisfy PSR. And I also think as well, this is something really important to remember. January, yes, can be a difficult month, but June if you go into June with a little bit to spare and a little bit of wiggle room, as Newcastle found last year to their cost, there are teams out there who are desperate. And in that last week of June, when clubs are battling to satisfy that PSR deficit, there's actually deals to be done and situations to be exploited. So wouldn't Newcastle be better off this January getting one or two out and giving themselves that scope to then go and spend that 30, 40, 50 million pound at the end of June, and being the club who are in the position of power? So I don't expect much in January. Mark Gay could potentially happen, but the fee Palace want would have to come way down. Now, there's a chance there, but I do think at the moment it's probably unlikely. Now, could AFL players be targeted? Well, yes, down the line. I wrote in my Newcastle Confidential column yesterday that Newcastle have watched young Norman Bassett down at Coventry, 20-year-old, dubbed as the next Victor Guimaraes. Newcastle watched him twice recently when he played at Sunderland at Middlesbrough for Coventry. Really exciting prospect, young forward. So, yes, they are looking at the AFL, of course they are. And it is that type of market that Paul Mitchell is looking to target. He looked at the signings, the likes of Bruno and Botman and others, and listen, they've been fantastic signings for the club, but he wants to sign them before they are at that value of 30, 35, 40 million pounds. So expect to see more signings by Newcastle in the region of 5, 10, 15 million pound, with the hope of those players then training on and becoming stars. Now, 3 questions here to finish with, guys. It's Jake asks, why is Louis Miley going to the under-21s? Billingham Mag, when will Sven Botman be back? And Mark Henderson, why is Asula not getting more game time? Now, first of all, with Miley, he's going to play for the 21s tonight against Crystal Palace. It's just a case of game time. He's been out 7 months now, and I understand that to a degree. As much as I understand the player, I think, is itching to get back involved with the first team. So that was the explanation there. In terms of Botman, we're probably looking at January. Now, he is back running. He's back out on the grass, as they say. But yeah, I think there's going to be caution there, given the problems he had last season. I wouldn't expect to see him until after Christmas. And the last one in terms of Will Asula in minutes, well, it's just a case of being ready, guys. And now Wilson is back. I know there's probably a want among a few of you given Newcastle's problems on Monday night with goals. They've got a forward there on the bench. Why didn't they actually throw him on? Well, Wilson is deputy now to Alexander Isak. Fingers crossed Callum Wilson can stay fit. But in terms of Will Asula, I really, from what I'm hearing, I wouldn't expect to see a great deal of him this side of Christmas. It's all on the player himself. If he shows it in training, that he kicks on like Lewis Hall, like that improvement he made. But for now, and even this season, yeah, Asula probably isn't going to see much game time. Now, as I said, guys, there's loads of questions there I haven't answered, but I can only go on for so long, and we spent a lot of time dedicated to Tonali and Bruno, which, in conclusion, to wrap up all of what I've said previously, I've been of this suspicion for a while now, to talk to the point Eddie made. If it benefits the team, I don't think the two of them together in the team, where Eddie would probably play them, Bruno in the middle, Tonali to the right of him in the number 8, I don't think it does benefit the team right now. So at that end, I would continue with only one of them in the 6 and the runners and the more physical players in the 2 number 8 slots. But if there is a solution to be found, then I don't know if it is the answer. I think the only thing left to give a go is Bruno back in the 8 and Tonali in the 6, but that doesn't look like it's going to happen anytime soon. Now, I'll be down at Crystal Palace tomorrow. I'm actually flying there tonight. The trains are off. So yeah, if you are at the airport later and you're taking the same route as me, please do come and say hello, and we'll talk about something other than Bruno and Tonali, please. But no, guys, if you are getting there, it's trains, planes and automobiles for this one, going all over the place. So have a safe trip down. I'll be up and down that little patch of terrace at Crystal Palace at Selhurst Park tomorrow night, reflecting on prediction time, guys. And like I say, I have been quite good with these so far, although I was spectacularly wrong on Monday night. I think Newcastle will win tomorrow. I really do. And I've committed to this for a long time now, that they're better when they don't have the ball. Now, the away form has been sticky, but that blueprint was laid at Nottingham Forest. And I think if they can take that into Palace tomorrow, I do expect an away victory. I do. And I think they'll be itching. I think they'll be hurting. Everything I've heard this week is that Monday wasn't good. We were with Eddie on his birthday there today, and he said, well, no, it hasn't been a very good week. He hasn't had any presents so far. He probably have to celebrate his birthday a little bit down the line. So, yeah, guys, I honestly think it's going to be an away win tomorrow. Because Monday night, yes, it was a surprise, but it wasn't really a surprise on reflection that Newcastle had more of the ball, and the issues we've spoken about so much. I flagged them weeks ago, that ability to break teams down. And when they do have that increased possession and the work into those positions of promise, a phrase I use a lot, for some reason, I don't know why, that that final execution, it lets them down so badly. I'm expecting it to be different tomorrow when they've perhaps got a little bit more space. If Palace do come onto them at home, as all home teams do at some point in the game, it does then leave that space to exploit. And that is where and how and why Newcastle will win the game. So let's see if I'm right. Thank you so much again for watching. Please leave your comments below the line on Bruno and Tonali. I clearly don't have the answers. I end up, like I said before, they're posing more questions, really. So tell me what you think. Hit comment, like, subscribe, super thanks, everything else, and I'll see you again in 24 hours' time. Okay, take care, guys. Bye-bye.